Hello everyone, welcome to my channel, and in this video we are going to discuss about Kubernetes Objects. So in the previous video we have deployed a multi-container application into our Azure Kubernetes. Now in this video we are going to discuss about Kubernetes objects like pods, deployments, daemon set, StatefulSet, ReplicaSet and jobs. So let's begin with the pod. So what is pod? The pod is the basic execution unit in the Kubernetes. Is a pod. A pod represents a single instance of containerized application. You can think of a pod as a container or a group of containers that are deployed together in a single node in the cluster. It means that in entire cluster, pod is the smallest execution unit to deploy your application. Now in the demo section, we are going to deploy the application as a pod. So for that, let's open the Lens. So here I am using the Lens software to manage a Kubernetes cluster. So click here, create a resource and type pod. So let's give the name. So to create any YAML file, these 4 parameters are required: API version, kind, metadata and spec. Now let's give the name. So here I will give the name vote. So here I am going to deploy our vote application, this one, voting application, using the pod. So vote, let's give the same name, vote and image. Here I am taking the image from deployment file. So this is the image reference and port is same. So click on create and your application is deployed as a pod. So let's wait. Yes. Now let's quickly check. Yes. So now you can see your application is deployed as a pod. Now whenever you deploy your application using a pod, there are 2 limitations. Means you can't take advantage of Kubernetes main features, high availability and high scaling. It means that, let's take an example. By any chance, if your application load is increased and you want to scale the application, that you can't do it if you release your application as a pod. And the second one is a high availability. Let's take an example. By any chance, if your pod is failed or delete, you can't get your pod back automatically. For that, you have to manually create or you have to manually deploy your application. Now these 2 constraints you will resolve using the deployment. So now let's understand what is deployment. So deployment is a high level object that manage a replication controller or a replica set and provide the declarative update to the application. With the deployment, this is an important line, you can specify the desired state of your application. It means that the deployment will ensure that your application running in that state. So using this deployment, you can achieve the both functionality, high availability and high scaling. So let's deploy the same voting application using the deployment. So again, create a resource and here you type the deployment. Now let's give the name. Let me replace nginx with the vote. Here I am putting the ReplicaSet 1 and image. I am taking the same image. and click the create button. Okay, so now you can see here in the deployment objects, this is our, let me short by age. So this is our deployment file, vote-deployment, and the pod is created automatically. So now let me first check the application. Yes, so my application now deployed using the deployment object. Now there are two features, high availability and high scaling. So let's discuss on this. So let's take an example. If your pod is deleted accidentally, so it is a deployment responsibility to make sure that your application is running. So deployment is make sure that your desired state of your application is maintained. So this vote-deployment applications deploy automatically. And second one is scaling. So let's say you have decided to scale your application, so you can easily scale using property called ReplicaSet. Replicas. So here you can increase, so let's say 3. It means that it will create a 3 replica of my application. Now by any chance, if any of this pod is deleted, it's a deployment responsibility to make sure that any time it will run the 3 replica of application. So this deployment object is very useful, and in the real-time scenarios we are deploy our application using the deployment objects. Now let's talk about the next, replica controller and ReplicaSet. So a replication controller ensures that a specified number of pod replicas are running at given of time. If any pod fail or deleted, the replication controller will create a new pod to replace them. This helps to ensure the availability of application. So in the deployment we have given the replica count. So let's take an example. I increase and I replace with 5. Now this ReplicaSet will ensure that, so if you see, go to the ReplicaSet, you will see here the desired is 5, current is 5, ready is 5. So this ReplicaSet is ensure that the availability of your applications. So let's say here I'm going to remove 3 pod. So you can see it immediately create a new 3 pods. So it is done, or it is managed by ReplicaSet. Now next discuss about the StatefulSet. What is StatefulSet? So a StatefulSet is used to manage a stateful application. Stateful applications are applications that store data and keep tracking it. All the databases such as MySQL, Oracle, PostgreSQL are the example of StatefulSet. So there are two types of applications, stateful and stateless. Now what is stateless? So stateless application on the other hand do not keep the data. Node.js and Nginx are the example of stateless application. For each request, the stateless application will receive a new data and process it. This is useful if your application need to maintain the state across the restart or need to communicate with each other with a stable network address. Okay, so this is a very useful Kubernetes object. So whenever you want to deploy your database, there is only one way to deploy, is called StatefulSet. So here what I did, I have already created the StatefulSet file. So same API version, kind, metadata, specs. These 4 parameters is required. Okay, but in the StatefulSet we need to maintain, or we need to store the data That's why we require a storage. Okay, so because the database will store the data, and that data we can use later in case of any deletion or in case of any disaster. We want that data right back. So that StatefulSet will make sure that your data will persist. So let's quickly copy this, and here I am going to create. Yes, so now here you can see my PostgreDB is now deployed, and here you can see you have to go here StatefulSet, and you can see here the definitions of your database. Okay, now whenever you create a StatefulSet, okay, and it will create a storage per system volume. So per system volume is nothing but it's a disk where you are going to store your data in this disk. So if by any chance if someone by default or accidentally if someone removed this StatefulSet, your data will remain same. Okay, so you can again use this disk and create your database again. Now let me wait and let me connect my database. Now just I will quickly show you how to connect the database. So so here I am going to create a service to expose my database outside the Kubernetes network, so I can connect using PSQL command. Okay. Okay, so service is already there. Let me quickly check. Yes, so I am taking this external IP and I am going to connect my database. 20.197.112.128. Yes, now it's connected. Let's run the command, and here you can see the databases: Postgre, test, template 1, template 0. Now you can create also database and run again. So you can see test 2 is available. So this is all about the StatefulSet. Now let's understand about the services. We are using these services to expose your application outside the Kubernetes network, similar like our PostgreDB. Okay, so basically there are three types of service: cluster IP, it's a by default service; node port; and load balance. So let's discuss what is cluster IP. So this type of service is a default and create a stable IP address within a cluster, accessible only to the node and other cluster component. It is used for communication between the pods. So whenever this cluster IP is basically used to communicate internal Kubernetes objects. Okay. The second one is node port. So this type of service open a static port for each node in the cluster, forwarding traffic to the target pod. This allows access to the service from outside the cluster. So you can create a service. So let me take an example of this database only, and everything is same. Here what I will going to do, instead of type, so if I remove this line and let me give default. See here, so if I click create it, what is the error? Oh, wait. So whenever you create this, now here you can see, here right now I have not mentioned any type. So by default, this one is, it will create a cluster IP type of service. Okay, but this cluster IP type of service is only used to communicate inside the cluster. Now there are other two types of service, so let's discuss. First is node port. So using this also you can communicate your database or any service outside the cluster. Okay, it will create a where is it, this one, yeah. So it is create a port, specific port to access your database, and here the port is 30591. Okay, so this allow access to service from outside to the cluster. See, this type of service open static port on each node in the cluster. Now what is load balancing? So this type of service create an external load balancer in the cloud provided infrastructure, forwarding traffic to the target port. It provides a single entry point for an external client to access the service. So whenever you expose your application, the best practice to create a load balancer type of service. So it will give a dedicated external IP address to access your database. So here I am just changing the type load balancer, and if I create this, it will create a external IP address to access your application. So it's a single source of you can say single entry point where you can access your service. So let's wait, it will take a time, and I will show you in the portal also. So meanwhile I will show you. So whenever you create any service using this load balancer, it will give the external IP address, and you can see here in the portal.azure.com, if you give the IP address here and show, so this is a public IP address. It will create a public IP address. It means that you can configure your DNS name also here. You can access your database using the DNS name also. Now let's discuss about the next Kubernetes objects called daemon set. So a daemon set, I don't have right now a specific example for this object, but in the coming videos, whenever we configure the Prometheus server in our Kubernetes cluster, I will show you what is the use of daemon set. But a daemon set is ensure that a specific pod is running on all the node in the cluster or a subset of node as specified. This is useful for deploying an application that need to run on every node in the cluster, and such as logging agent or monitoring agent. So it means that, let's say if you have two nodes, so this is a daemon set responsibility to make sure that, so whatever the node or whatever the pod you deployed, it will run on a both node. So let's say you want to track your application, and for that you have created one application called logging. Now you want this logging application is deploy each and every pod, and for that you have to create a daemon set. So let me try it. I just give you the daemon set, and this is overall about. Let's create it. So I just quickly show you. Yes, great. So now if you go here in the daemon set section, okay, and select the namespace cube system, and our name is Flutter Elasticsearch. Yeah, so here you can see now that how many ports? 2 ports. Why? Because we have a 2 node. So if you have 100 nodes, so it will create 100 port instead of 2. And you can see here, so if I go here and search this, so here you can see this is a 2 pod and controlled by who? Daemon set. Okay, it's very simple. Jobs, it's same. Job are used to run a batch process or perform a one-time task. So you want your specific requirement. For example, let's say you have deployed 100 databases in the Kubernetes cluster. Now you want to run a particular script in all the running pod. You can create jobs, or you want to take a database backup, or you want to take the application backup, or you want to run a specific command to your application to extract your log. You can use a job. And cron job is a Linux concept. You want to schedule your job, then you can create a cron job. So this is all about the Kubernetes object. Please make sure you like the video and subscribe to channel. It will really motivate me to create a content for you. Thank you very much. See you in the next video.